Hey, this is Josh Alexander, and today we're going to be going over how to safely sell your home during this coronavirus pandemic. So let's get into it. So first, I want to start off by saying that if you're in one of those high-risk categories, you shouldn't be selling your home right now unless you absolutely need to. So there's no reason to risk your life just to try to get a home sale where you can wait a few months down the line, put your home on the market, and be a lot safer. So if you're at high risk, this is not something that you should be doing unless you absolutely have to. Okay, so let's start at looking at before you place your home on the market. There's a few things you could be doing to make sure you're staying safe. The first is when you first initially meet with your agent. So typically what you used to do is you'd have a few agents in your house. They'd be coming in with a marketing presentation, talking about the comparable sales in the area, and you'd be giving them a tour of your home. So that's something that you really, if you can avoid it, you don't want to have that many people in your house. So ideally, if you're comfortable with it, you want to have some type of video chat set up with these agents that you're interviewing. Walk them around your house virtually. They're able to send you the packets ahead of time via email, and you're able to go over the comparable sales, everything over the phone. So that's the safest way to kind of initially start putting your home on the market without having anybody in your house. So after that is when you're going to start having people in your house. So the first point of contact that you'll have to have as a seller is for photography. So you need to have those photos taken because otherwise buyers aren't going to see your property and you're not going to be able to sell your home. So the photographer will come in. The best thing you can do and the best advice I have to keep both of you safe is talk to the photographer ahead of time. They're going to give you a list of things that you should be doing to make sure the house looks as good as possible, and then also making sure that they don't have to touch anything. So when you're setting up your house and getting ready for them to take photos, make sure all the lights are on, make sure all the closet doors are open if you can, because buyers are going to want to see these type of things now because they can't go into your home physically. You're going to want to make sure that basically everything doesn't have to be touched. So doors are open, that type of thing. Once you talk to the photographer, they might give you some more specifics. Every photographer has a couple different things they might want you to do, but make sure you contact that photographer ahead of time so they can send you a list of things to do to keep both you and the photographer safe while this happens. So the second point I want to make about that photographer is you should be having a virtual tour being set up by that photographer with every home that's sold right now, because that is going to be the way that most buyers are going to see your house. You're not going to have open houses anymore. Those are not allowed in California. You're really going to only limit those one-on-one agent showings to very, very specific buyers that you know are very interested in placing an offer. So everybody else, the only way they're going to be able to see your property is through some type of virtual tour. So you really want to make sure your photographer is doing that for you, and that's something that should be on every single home. Okay, so now your home is ready to hit the market. So what are agents doing differently now than what they've done before? I kind of mentioned it a little bit with the open houses. Because those have been canceled, that's one of the main ways you had buyers see your property beforehand. Now we're doing it a little bit differently, and it's something that is actually relatively new. It only started about 2 weeks ago, and it's something called virtual open houses. So this is something that the MLS is doing where agents can go into the MLS and say, hey, at 1 o'clock on Saturday, I'm going to be at the seller's property. If you'd like to see the house, have your buyer log into this Zoom meeting or some type of virtual video platform, and they're able to basically walk the home with the agent going through your home, ask questions they might have. If they want a closer look at a certain closet or have a closer look at a certain fixture, they're able to do that without actually being at the property. And that's something that's really never been done before, because now you're able to have these questions asked in real time by buyers while the agent's in the house. So one note to that is that yes, you do have to have an agent in your house. That is one more point of contact you'll have to make. But if you have 10, 15 buyers visiting through this virtual open house, that's going to eliminate a lot of those buyers that will be coming through one-on-one otherwise. So it's a great way to get a lot of buyers to see your house without physically having to let anybody in. Now, if you want to sell your home, but you really are hesitant about having anybody in the house whatsoever before you go into escrow, you can still do that, but you need to be prepared to be able to get offers on the property without the buyers physically seeing it first. So if you're okay with that, then you can move ahead and do that. There are ways that the buyer's agent can write the contract that says, hey, here's the property we want, here's the price, list out all the terms, And what they can do is put into the contract saying, hey, we haven't seen the property. The only thing that we request is that within the first 1 or 2 days that the buyer is able to go inside, tour the property, just to make sure that everything matches what they've seen in the virtual tours and the pictures. And then once they do that, we can move on through escrow. So there are ways as a seller to protect yourself even further if you don't want any buyers in your home before escrow. And that's kind of the easiest way to do it, is just say no physical showings unless you're in escrow. Now that will eliminate some buyers that have to see the home before they place an offer, but you still have the ability to get your house into escrow while keeping yourself as protected as possible by not really having anybody outside of the agent and then the initial photographer in your house before you get into escrow. Okay, so now let's say that you get into escrow. So what has changed and what do you need to be doing during escrow to keep yourself as safe as possible and also minimize any of those face-to-face contacts you need to have, as well as minimize the amount of people coming into your house? So the first one is going to be the general inspection. So most buyers are going to want some type of general inspection, so you do need to allow that as long as you have that in the contract. And what that basically used to look like is you'd have the general inspector in the house, the selling agent would be in the house, sometimes the buying agent would be there as well, and then the buyers a lot of times would meet the agent at the house at the end to go over anything they found. So that was a lot of people in the house. What's changed now, and this is something that you should basically be asking for with any inspection during escrow, is that just the inspector comes in the house. They're going to be there. They're going to spend usually 2 to 4 hours there, so you'll probably need to leave the house at that point to do that. But that way, there's only one person in the house. The general inspector will do all the work. They're going to go home, write the report, and then report back to the buyers via phone or video chat, but they won't be doing it at your property. So that's the first way to really start minimizing the amount of people through your house and only going down to 1 versus 3, 4, 5 people. Okay, so something to note with the inspection. A lot of times once the inspector gives the buyer the report and goes over everything, a lot of times the buyer will actually submit something called a repair request asking you to fix certain things that are wrong with the property. So one thing that you can do to minimize anybody coming in and out of your home is, instead of having a professional come through and fix something, you can issue the buyer a credit at the end of escrow and have them go through and fix it themselves afterwards. And that will basically eliminate any other contractors coming into your house to fix issues with the property. So this doesn't guarantee the buyer will agree to it, but it's something that you could respond with and just say, hey, we'll give you a credit at the end of escrow. And a lot more buyers are open to it now because they understand the circumstances that you really just don't want people in your houses. So if you can, try to just do a credit at the end of escrow. Otherwise, you will have to have a few more people in your house to get those repairs done. The next possible point of contact that you might need to have during an escrow process as a seller would be the appraisal. So if a buyer is putting an offer on a home that needs to have a loan on the property, the bank is going to want to have the property appraised. And the reason I say you might need this is because lender requirements have been changing rapidly over the last couple of days and weeks, whereas usually they almost always required an in-person appraisal, going through your house, taking measurements, taking pictures. Whereas now, because of everything going on, the stay-at-home order, what they're trying to go to, and you see this more and more frequently, is called a drive-by appraisal, where the actual appraiser goes to the neighborhood of the property. He'll look at the outside of the property, take pictures, walk through the neighborhood, and then go home to do the rest of their job. So they'll go home and look at the comparable sales, all the other pictures that way, so the appraiser is never entering to your house. Okay, so the next point of contact that you'll have to have as a seller during escrow will be getting the deed notarized. So this is something that a lot of escrow companies are now sending a notary out to your house, so you don't have to leave the house, but you will have to step outside onto your porch, and then it's a single piece of paper. The notary will come, you'll sign it in front of them, they'll do their thing, and then basically leave and give it back to escrow. So that's something that you need to have done, and you can either do it at your house, or if you don't want the notary at your house, you can go to a bank and have it done there or anywhere else where you can find a notary. But it needs to be notarized and then sent back to escrow. So after you get that deed notarized, really there's not going to be too much activity happening in terms of face-to-face contact or anybody going into your house until at the very end of escrow. And the last point of contact you'll have is the buyer is going to come through one more time. Usually they can waive this, but most buyers are going to want to see this. They come through the house and they're just verifying that the condition of the property is similar to when they saw it the first time. And then they're also looking for any repairs that were done. So if you and the buyer have agreed on any repairs that needed to be done in order for them to move forward with purchasing the property, they're just going to verify those repairs were done correctly. And that's called verification of property. And that usually happens 2 to 3 days before escrow closes. They're usually in and out within 15-20 minutes, so they're not there very long. But that's the last point of contact before you close escrow that you'll have to have with someone during a transaction. So I know it's a lot of information for sellers, but just to recap, there's going to be at least 5 points of contact that you're going to have to accept if you want to sell your home. And so those 5 points of contact will be the photographer to be there initially. You're usually going to have the buyer walk through the property either right before they go into escrow or right after you go into escrow. You're going to have a general inspector at the property. Hopefully the appraisal gets waived so no one's in the property. The fourth is going to be that you need to have that face-to-face contact to get that deed notarized. And then the fifth is going to be that final walkthrough the buyer does. So if you're able to get everything done perfectly lined up, you only have to have 5 points of contact during a sale. Now let's talk about some of the other things that can happen during a sale that's going to increase this. So the first one is if you have to have multiple buyers in the home before actually getting into escrow. So this goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. If you're not allowing any buyers in your home until after you get into escrow, then you're going to keep yourself safe. If you are allowing buyers into the house before you go into escrow and before they place an offer, then that's really going to be up to you on how many buyers you're letting through. It could be 2 buyers, it could be 5 buyers. Obviously, you're going to want to keep it down to as minimum as much as you can. So again, this goes back to making sure your agent is vetting those buyers before they walk through the property. A couple other points of contact. Again, we talked about it a little bit, but the appraisal, sometimes you're going to have one, sometimes you won't. So that might be another area of contact that goes from 5 to 6 during an escrow process in terms of the amount of times you're face-to-face or having someone walk through your house. And then the final one I want to talk about, which is less common but definitely happens, is during the general inspection, if the inspector finds something and tells the buyer, hey, maybe you want to get an electrician to look at this specifically or a plumber to look at this specifically because there might be something more going on, then contractually you need to let the buyer do as many investigations as they want. You can't say no to them. So basically, if they say, hey, we want to have an electrician out to your house, we want to have a plumber out to your house to get a better idea of what's going on, that's something that you have to be able to be comfortable with and know before you place your home on the market that those are some points of contact that generally don't happen but could happen during a transaction when you're trying to sell your house. So other than that, that's really the only variables that you're going to see in most transactions. So again, you have a minimum of 5, but I would say if you're comfortable with 10 people walking through your home or less, then you're going to have a good chance of selling your home, finding the right buyer, and giving yourself a little bit of flexibility in terms of how many people are coming through your home. Okay, so my final thought for sellers, and something that you want to make sure you're doing to protect yourself as much as possible, is we talked about it a little bit with the photographer, but anytime someone's in your house or coming into your house, you want to make sure that they aren't touching anything. So what you need to be doing is if you have buyers in your home, making sure all the lights are on, their closet doors are open, all the doors are open, and making sure that the buyer really doesn't have to touch anything to be able to view your property. And that's the same thing with inspectors, that's the same thing with appraisers, that's the same thing for anybody entering your property. You just want to make sure that their points of contact through the house are going to be 0 if possible or very minimal to keep yourself as well as the buyer safe. And the second thing I'll say in terms of safety is if you do have people in your house, you want to make sure you have some type of hand sanitizing station at the beginning so they can sanitize their hands just in case they don't bring any. And then also if you have any excess gloves, shoe booties, or masks, have those available just in case the buyer doesn't have them. So you don't want to rely on the buyer if you don't have to have them making sure that they're following the proper procedures and protocols. If you're able to have these things ready for them, that's just going to give you that much more confidence that people coming through your home are going to have and take the proper caution while walking through the home and keeping you as safe as possible. And then obviously after anybody leaves your home, you're going to want to disinfect all those surfaces that the buyers might have touched. So doorknobs, light switches, Just want to make sure that you're keeping everything as sanitary as possible. I'm hoping that cleared some things up for you as a seller to figure out exactly what you need to be doing to keep yourself safe, as well as what the general process looks like now, before, during, at the end of escrow for a seller, so you know what to expect, so you know the risks going in if you do want to put your home on the market right now. I'm updating everybody at least once a week on what's going on with the market, as well as doing interviews with other industry professionals so you can get their side of what's happening as well, just to keep you as informed as possible as we all navigate through this unprecedented time and hopefully come out the other end as soon as possible. Thanks and have a great day.